Hello and welcome to another HorrorFest 2018 video, and today we're reviewing the 2018 sequel to the 1978 Halloween, and it's simply called Halloween because why not? Let's go ahead and dive in. Now first I will say that I'm going to keep this spoiler free as much as possible, and I will deal with spoilers at the end as I do with all of my reviews. However, there are things in this movie I do want to talk about that are spoilers, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, that'll come at the end of this video. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk about 2018's Halloween. So, the first thing I have to say about 2018 Halloween is they did it. They made a good sequel to Halloween. Now, yes, I know right away that's going to ruffle some feathers and say, well, wait a minute. They made a Halloween sequel in 1981. Yes, and that movie's fine, and that movie's good. I think this is better. As a lifelong fan of Michael Myers and as a lifelong fan of this film franchise, I think this is probably the best sequel that we've gotten for a Halloween ever. And they've kind of already done this idea once before, the idea of, hey, all these other timelines don't matter, we're going to go ahead and just, this is a sequel to the first movie, everything else didn't happen. They did that once with Halloween H2O, and we're doing it again here. And that's fine. I think, honestly, in 2018, it makes the most sense if you're going to make a new Halloween movie but tie it to the originals to go this route. And I think for that reason, they do an excellent job. Jamie Lee Curtis is back and she returns as Laurie Strode. This time, she is more akin to a Sarah Connor, I would say. If there's one thing I'll say about Halloween 2018, it's that it's very much the Terminator 2 of this franchise now. You have Laurie Strode, who after 40 years has literally just become a hard, badass woman who wants to kill the former stalker slash serial killer Michael Myers, who's been locked in the loony bin for 40 years and is now out again doing his nefarious slashing and killing of teenagers. And I loved how this movie opened. It opens with these two podcasters slash journalists who want to do a story about Laurie Strode and Michael Myers, and their end goal is they want to get both of them in the same room and do a story of them talking to each other. I don't necessarily understand how this would ever work, and that part of the story didn't make sense to me. Like, why would you interview someone who, you know, horrifically killed your friends 40 years later, but you're in the same room as them? Like, that part of it didn't make sense to me, but whatever, it's besides the point. The way that this movie opens is really cool and interesting because that you have these two podcasters in this old asylum, and they go to meet Michael Myers. He's outside, and you've seen these shots in the trailer where they're kind of standing on like this floor that almost looks like a chessboard, and there's a bunch of different crazy people out there, and the one guy's trying to taunt Michael Myers into saying something, and that's one thing that happens a lot in this movie. People want him to say something. He never says anything. He has his original mask and kind of shows it. And another thing I really liked about this movie was they did a lot of like these off camera, but you could see part of his face shots where like, oh, maybe you'd see like his eye for a minute, which is kind of jacked up, or you'd see like kind of the side of his face and his beard, or you'd see a shot of him standing with without seeing his head or something like that. They did a really good job of doing shots like that in this movie. Another thing I really appreciated about this movie is the feel of it. It has that grainy 70s VHS feel to it. At the same time, and one of the biggest things I have to applaud of this entire movie is getting John Carpenter's original score from the 78 movie, having him come back, give this movie his blessing, and having him help with the music. It is used so incredibly well in this movie, and the biggest thing I'll say about Halloween 2018 is that we live in an era now where people are making sequels to original movies and ignoring other movies. What I like about this is I compare it to something like Episode 7, where Episode 7 was, yes, the next installment in a long and beloved franchise, and Halloween is kind of there too, not at the same level as Star Wars, but it's kind of there. And the difference here is I felt like I was watching a new continuation of Halloween in 2018, whereas with Star Wars, and this is a major complaint with a lot of people with Episode 7, is it just felt like I was watching A New Hope again there, where they just kind of rehashed everything. Not to say that Episode 7 is a bad movie, I really like Episode 7, but that's a major problem with that movie. Here, they do the perfect idea of paying homage to what came before it, while also doing their own thing with it. Another thing I have to applaud this movie is the use of humor in it. Like, there's a lot of humorous parts in this movie. There are a lot of parts where I actually laughed out loud, and I didn't see that coming going into it. It's a movie that takes its source material seriously, but not too seriously, and it has its fun. One thing I'll say about it is I had more fun in this movie than I think any other movie I've watched in 2018, with maybe the exception of Avengers Infinity War, and that's a really big thing to say coming out of a new Halloween movie. It just seems like these characters, you know, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, they get rehashed every couple of years, and it's kind of, you come out and you go, yeah, whatever, but the originals are better. This is the first time I can honestly say I walked out of it and said, you know what, that movie can stand right next to the original as being a great movie that I enjoyed. And that's the biggest compliment I can give 2018 Halloween. Now, yes, there's some other things that happen in the movie. They do focus a little bit on the family drama of the Strodes between, you know, Jamie Lee Curtis's Laurie Strode and her daughter and her granddaughter. So you kind of get 3 generations of the Strodes in this movie. There's a little bit of a teenage love triangle thing going on in this movie. It's done effectively that it's quick, and it's obviously not the main focus of this movie. But that's in there as well, which kind of pays good homage to the original movie as well. I like that they made subtle hints at different things from the past of Halloween. You know, they refer to the murders from '78 as the Babysitter Murders, which many of you may know that was the original title of the 1978 Halloween movie before they changed it to just calling it Halloween. That was a nice nod there. There's some other nice nods in the movie as well, and I loved this movie from beginning to end. I loved every minute I watched it from beginning to end. I thought it was great. There's one little problem I have with the story in this movie, and we'll get to it in spoilers, but it wasn't big enough of a problem that it ruined my movie experience or ruined the movie for me in any way whatsoever. It was more of a story beat that I was like, it doesn't really make sense, but whatever. And I think the way this movie ended as well was really, really awesome, and we're going to talk all about that in spoilers. So before I get to spoilers here, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you my letter grade. I'm giving this movie an A. I think it's one of the best movies I've seen in 2018, and I think it's a Halloween sequel that can stand neck and neck with the original Halloween. So now let's go ahead and jump into spoilers. So you've been warned, I'm going to spoil Halloween 2018. So the first thing I have to say about Halloween 2018 in terms of spoilers is the character of the new Dr. Loomis, and I forget what his doctor name is in the movie. There's something that happens with him that just doesn't make sense, and I don't know if it was a point in the plot that was trying to get the audience to go, huh? And that's exactly what they do with it. And it's kind of funny too, because again, this movie is very tongue-in-cheek at times. In fact, the first time that Laurie Strode meets this new Dr. Loomis, she literally calls him the new Loomis. They have kind of an exchange, and he says, oh, you know, you're Laurie Strode, and she just looks at him and says, oh, I guess you're the new Loomis. I thought that was a nice line in this movie. Anyways, so the point of this movie is they want to move Michael Myers from, you know, the asylum he's been in 40 years to an actual penitentiary. And you don't actually see this bus crash. The bus crashes, and I assume later on that this doctor helped him to escape because this doctor had like an obsession with him. And they don't really play that angle up though. And that was my complaint here is there's a point in this movie where the cop that's in the movie and this doctor save the granddaughter of Laurie Strode from being killed by Michael Myers, and they're kind of out driving around, and the cop's like, we're going to take you back to your grandma's house, but if you see Michael Myers on the way, let me know. And they're kind of driving around, and they see him, and he's like, you know, F it, I'm going to go run him over. And they run him over, and he and the doctor get out, and the girl's sitting in the back seat, and the doctor guy looks at the cop, and all of a sudden he just takes out he has a knife in his pen or something, and just starts stabbing him and kills him. And then as the audience, you're kind of sitting here like, wait, what? And then this guy looks over at Michael Myers, who's laying on the ground because he's been run over by a car, and they go, And next scene is this doctor is putting Michael Myers' mask on, and there's like 30 seconds of this movie. I'm like, are we really going to go to the point where, hey, we killed the original Michael Myers, but this guy's taken over? And then he kind of drags his body back into the car, puts him in the back seat, throws the mask in there, and just drives. And he starts talking about how, oh, I have to keep, studying this man, and I have to do all this stuff, and I have to keep him alive. You have to keep pure evil alive. It's a bullshit part of this movie where I was like, we didn't need to do this. And spoiler, that Michael Myers, he wakes up or whatever, he gets pissed off, he gets out of the car, and he actually smashes that dude's face in what I thought was one of the funniest parts of the movie because it was incredibly fake. However, when I saw it in the theater, I was the only person who laughed out loud when he stomped this guy's face because I just thought it was absurd. And that whole part of the movie, I think, doesn't work. But the rest of the movie works so incredibly well that it's kind of forgotten about. Like, you get to the end and you walk out of the movie like, yeah, the movie's really good. And you forget about that dumb little twist they tried to pull in the movie. But it doesn't work. It makes absolutely no sense. The other thing I really appreciated about Halloween 2018 was that they kind of walked back the idea that there's a supernatural element with Michael Myers. He's just a serial killer. And this is shown by, he takes a lot of damage in this movie. At one point, he gets his fingers blown off by Laurie Strode. He takes a pretty wicked shot in the neck at one point where he's just kind of bleeding a lot. And then, obviously, the end of this movie, which I really have to praise the end of this movie, it ends with Laurie Strode has obviously built, she's a crazy person now, kind of, and she's built this, bomb shelter thing almost underneath her kitchen, like, island thing. And so they hide down there, and Michael Myers gets out. She's like, I have to go up. I have to end this. It's a cool little play on the original Halloween that's kind of cool. And he ends up throwing her off the balcony, and then he looks down, sees her laying on the ground, looks around a little bit, looks back down. She's gone. And they're literally playing off the end of the original Halloween, and I thought this was awesome. And then the tables get turned on him, where he's looking around the house for her, and she's the one that's hiding. And what ends up happening at the end of this movie is they trap him in the basement thing, and it's not a bomb shelter, it's a trap for him. They trap him in there, and they burn him alive. They escape the house. End of movie. It's not the first time he's been burned alive at the end of one of these movies, and if you sit through the credits, you hear him breathing, so you know he's not dead. What I like about this kind of idea of the end here is, this movie could go one of two ways. This might be the last Halloween movie. It's not going to be, but it could go as the last Halloween movie with Jamie Lee Curtis, and I think it's a fitting end to the storyline with her. But you can also continue it. You can make another Halloween movie next year with her, and I'd be incredibly happy to see another one of these. In terms of any other spoilers or any other things, some of the deaths are pretty gruesome. Others are just kind of taken off camera. There's a pretty good shot of him stabbing a chick, through the neck with a knife. I thought was kind of like rougher than some of the other stuff in the movie. But I didn't, and I see a lot of critics saying this, and I didn't feel the same way. A lot of critics are out there saying, oh man, the gore is kind of like over the top in this movie. Other than the one scene of him stomping that dude's face in, I didn't feel the gore was that over the top in this movie. I felt it was kind of standard. I've seen a lot gorier horror movies in the last 10 years than this movie. I'll just say that. So, another interesting thing to point out, Danny McBride of Eastbound and Down and Vice Principals fame wrote part of this movie. He executively produced this movie with David Gordon Green, a dude who makes comedy movies. They made this Halloween movie, and they made a better Halloween sequel than anyone else ever has. And it's kind of crazy. The other important thing to note here is that the rumors are that if this movie is successful, which it will be, that Blumhouse Productions, the people that made this franchise, or made this movie, will now regain the rights to some other popular horror franchises, such as Friday the 13th. And y'all know how I feel about Friday the 13th and want another one of those really, really bad. So, anyways, that's the end of spoilers. Halloween 2018, I loved every minute of it. You guys should definitely go and check out Halloween 2018. It's an incredibly fun time at the movies, and it's a good throwback to the horror movies of the late 70s and the 80s. Anyways, guys, for Halloween 2018, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.